Welcome back to Pros from the Underground, coming to you from my basement in northern Michigan, where I read, write, think, and say things, and quite often I get to talk with someone. Well, it's 2024, and I'm starting things off with a humongous bang. I'm talking with the mighty Bonnie Jo Campbell. Among her many accolades, she is a National Book Award finalist, and so on. In fact, if you've not read her work, I could ask where you've been, but this is your opportunity if you haven't. You get to hear what she's doing, what is coming out. In fact, big news, new book coming out January 9. I've been reading Bonnie for years, not only because she's a Michigander, but also because she's a master of the craft of short fiction and novels. Also, I met Bonnie years ago when I first began thinking about fiction writing. I attended a conference she was teaching. The conference was put on by the mighty George Dilla, a luminary whom we lost some years ago. I needed to hear some good advice, some counsel, some lucidity, and Bonnie gave it to me. So I've been indebted to her for years. I've read, I think, just about everything that's been out in the world with her name on it. Today we're going to talk about The Waters, a big novel. And in fact, we have a lot to say about that and the whole process of putting together a complicated, elegant book like this. So we were both pretty caffeinated. We had a lot to say. So this is a two-parter. This is part one with Bonnie Jo Campbell. I hope you enjoy. Here we are with the mighty Bonnie Jo Campbell. I'm excited, and I suspect everybody on the other side of the camera is excited. She's talking about the book that is now coming into the world at any moment, depending on when this goes public, The Waters. So let me just ask, for those of you who even, I think, read probably the book jacket at this point will understand the nature of this question. What, Bonnie Jo, is your experience with, if any, of the Massasauga snake, Michigan's only venomous snake?
Yeah, the Massasauga rattlesnake is a swamp rattlesnake. Who knew? Who knew there was one? We think of them as a desert creature, right? But I don't know. I've been kind of obsessed with them since I was in elementary school, and one showed up on the playground, and there was much alarm. And I remember our custodian, Mr. Mike, had to get it in a corner, and then all us kids had to go back to class. And ever since then, I've been sort of obsessed with these rattlesnakes. They're very reclusive. They're kind of a dumpy snake. They're kind of a little bit they look kind of chunky and dumpy. They're kind of like Midwesterners, kind of like us. It's not a glamorous, it's not the glamorous timber rattlesnake or it's anything, or the diamondback. But I have gone out on many expeditions with biologists, and I must be a jinx because we've never when I've gone on an expedition with biologists have we ever found one. So but they tell me that's normal. They really do hide out. We are the only state where they're not endangered. They're just threatened. They're a threatened species. Every other state that has them, if they have, they're either extinct or endangered. And here's where everything turned is that I was working on a book trailer, can you believe we have such things, with my filmmaker friend Harula Rose. We were at her family's place in Michigan, and I'll be damned, we went for a walk and saw a baby Massasauga rattlesnake. I thought that is auspicious. When two women who wasted their time at University of Chicago and now work in the creative arts get together and see a rattlesnake, that it just seemed like things were going to go well.
Was that before the writing of The Waters, or was that during?
No, that was afterwards. We were making the book trailer, which you can find. There's a book trailer for this book, so you can find. There's a couple of them actually.
Good. Okay. Well, and can people find them openly on Google or YouTube, or should we go to?
Yeah, you can find them. I think you can just Google The Waters trailer. You can look for it on my site. I think I've got it on my BonnieJoCampbell.com site. And it's in a couple of places.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to peel right into craft issues. You were one of my early mentors, teachers of how to get started writing stories. And so it's been a giant pleasure for me to read your works and to read The Waters. So let's get into one of the my favorite questions. I'm interested in point of view. It's one of the, I think maybe the main reason I read fiction is to experience what a narrator does to us as readers. So in The Waters, you've got yourself a genuine omniscient narrator. The narrator moves from character to character, and sometimes even to the whole community. So I'm wondering, could you talk about that?
I
What
know that. Oh,
omniscience
go
helped
ahead.
you to do, or what problems did it create for you?
Yeah, I mean that was a big deal when the book turned omniscient, because it certainly didn't start out that way. It started out in third person, uh, from the point of view of the young character in the book, Donkey, and then I tried first person because I'm so enamored of True Grit. I love that crazy first person past tense forward driving character in True Grit. And so I tried all that, and it didn't sing the way I wanted it to. And so when I began to get more involved with the other characters, I tried on the omniscient, and it worked.
Mm.
Now, to write in the omniscient voice, it means you're writing in God's voice if it's a true omniscient. And what I mean by true omniscient is that the voice knows everything. I mean, everything. It's not just that the voice knows what's going on in the heads of various characters. The voice knows everything. So then once you start writing, I guess you're contending with God's problems. I mean, you've created an earth, you've created some people, and now you've got to let them spin out what you've created. I guess so I peopled it with big personalities and a lot of trouble, and I had to wait, and then I had to let it see what's going to happen. And there's a number of challenges that then happen, is that you as the writer have to know where to go, because you can be anywhere, and you can be making proclamations about how the world is, or you can be inside the head of an 11-year-old mathematician. So you have this whole world to choose from. And maybe that's part of why the book swelled up to 650 pages at one point. And yeah, it got a little bit long. One of the really particular problems you get with the omniscient is that you have to decide how to handle mystery in the book. Because, if you're, a classic mystery story, what the protagonist knows, what the detective knows. And so you're trying to find out what it is alongside the detective. So given that your narration knows everything, then it can come across as coy if you hold anything back.
Right.
And so it's a little bit challenging. Figuring out how to do it. So a lot of what I had to do was figure out where does this narration need to be paying attention, what is the narration directing the reader to look at,
Right.
and then the mysteries can lie outside of that.
That's so well said. I just want to underline that for a moment. I think you nailed how to manage omniscience. It's paying attention. In other words, if we're going to turn away from one character going away 4 months at a time, and of course the narrator would know where that character is, but you don't want to tell the reader, well, you've got to give the reader something else significant to focus on, right? It can't be just trivial stuff. Something else has to come along and like, okay, now we're all looking at this. Well, this other thing over here has to go away from our attention. And that works. That works really well. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
I know it really is a challenge, because you have to be, I mean, always as writers, we have to be compelling on every page. And here, I have to be compelling enough that you're not even asking yourself, well, what in the heck is going on with her, who
Right.
just, a terrible thing just happened to a character. Why are we not with that character? And so I have to be compelling enough with the other characters to justify that in a way.
Otherwise, it's yeah, that's exactly right. The narrator comes off as like, okay, I'm not going to tell you about that now. And so it has to, if it's compelling enough and we're drawn enough to this other thing that starts happening, then we don't even begin to go, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing to me? That's
I
cool.
know, and it's funny because it makes the book a little tiny bit less about plot. It is. I mean, plot is critical. I think plot is critical in this book. I mean, I do think it's a heavily plotted book, but somehow plot can't play the same role in the omniscient in a book with an omniscient narrator. I've used the omniscient voice in short stories before, and I have to say, if you can ever use it in a short story, it is thrilling.
Yeah.
It's thrilling because you've got this little world and you're saying, I mean, this little thing, and you're just saying, this is how it is. Again, it's God, it's your work as a God, and it's great. But what you find is it usually doesn't work.
Yeah.
You try it, and usually you dump yourself right back to your third person narrator and say, tried that, didn't work. But if it works, it's really fun. The reason I found myself wanting to use the omniscient in this book is because I found myself philosophizing about how things really were, not just in the head of my characters. What we normally do in fiction is say, this is how this character feels about it. This is what this character thinks about it. But I found myself, maybe because my mother died, and my mother was a very critical person. And I had to really gather up a lot of nerve to try to be a wise guy while my mother was alive. But once she died, I feel like I can at least put on a wise, I can try on wisdom. And I found myself saying, not only do these characters feel this way, but this is really how the world works. This is how, when characters have, when people are farmers and then suddenly they're not farmers, how does their world change? How does their worldview change? And so I'm going out on a limb in this book and making the case that when you are a farmer and then you sell your land and become a factory worker, your view of the world is very different. That's just one example.
And it's
So
not just someone, it is this way. In other words, you get rid of the according to, many people would say, you get rid of all that. And now you're saying what it is. That's
yeah. And it's funny because people used to write this way. I mean, Melville wrote this way, and we don't dare write this way anymore, but I'm giving it a shot.
Yeah, and of course I think of Marquez, the 100
Yes.
years.
Yeah, Marquez can write this way. That is for sure. It takes nerve. It takes a lot of confidence. And I'm not necessarily a confident person, but it takes a lot of writing and rewriting, because suddenly when you're out on a limb this way, there's a lot at stake, and you set the bar really high when you go out on a limb like this.
Wow.
And if you had better have the writing chops to pull it off, or you're going to have to pull it back and stop trying to do it. And I'm not that smart, but if I keep on a thing, like I keep on a passage and work it and work it and work it and work it. And that's why this book took 8 years to write.
Oh, wow.
Because I knew that I was over my head. And I knew I was going to.
There's no one on the screen or beyond the screen who buys any of that. So, I mean, it's pleasant to hear, but no, we're not buying it at all.
I knew that I had to get it right. So that's why I took my time. And that's why I was editing. That's why I was editing right up to the point where the thing went to the printer. My publisher was very tired of my editing. I did heavy duty editing on the page proofs that when they would send them to me and say, only make corrections, correct mistakes. And, I was still making, 500 changes. Nice. So if I pulled it off, it's just about hard work. If I pulled this off, this omniscient narration, it's just about hard work and about being so afraid to get it wrong, I guess, that I was determined, that I just stuck with it.
Well, the hard work also creates a sharpness and acuity that clearly is in play here, and other people who read the book will agree with me, I think. But yeah, I mean, of course, it's an epic too. I mean, it's a huge book in its scope, in what it's
yeah
doing.
It's kind of a saga, isn't it? It's a generational saga.
yeah, it's generational, and in that sense, it's a big undertaking. And when I was reading this, I'm like, I can't imagine what was in your head, all of the different sort of artistic urges, but I thought, oh, Bonnie set out to write a big old epic, of generational, and you can feel it. You can feel its scope.
I didn't. You know what I set out to write? Initially, I set out to write a funny romp for a young mathematician. I set out to write a funny book, like Wonder Boys or something, Michael Shabone's Wonder Boys or something. I'm going to write a funny book, but you know what? That's not who I am, I guess. We write the book that our soul wants us to write.
And let's get one more other issue that I don't think spoils anything. And it's related to the POV question, community. Clearly, it's not just the primary characters, the women of the family that we follow, but the narrator zooms off at key moments to express what the community itself knows, assumes, suspects. So I guess white Hartians, that's how I've been saying it in my head. Is that how white heart people are more than just social atmosphere. They're cause of harm and comfort. And what they think isn't just atmosphere. What they think really matters to how things play out. So could you talk about that? The difficulty of managing a zeitgeist? I mean, that's a cool move. And I wonder if that was a great pleasure or if it created problems, how that went for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the book, I guess you could say it started out trying to be about this young mathematician, and initially she was older. Initially, the donkey character was older, and but I stepped back in time to make her more vulnerable. So I started out following her, and basically, the way I write is to I think I've told you this before. I start out with a compelling character in a challenging situation, and so I started out with her, this girl who loved math, and then I wanted to give her the family that would make her job of becoming a mathematician as hard as possible.
Good.
or and I shouldn't say as hard as possible, but what I should say is what I want for all my characters is to absolutely become themselves. I want them to profoundly, in the Carl Jungian sense, that we all need to become our whole selves. And in real life, it takes us our whole life, but when we're writing fiction, we want it to happen a little quicker. And right on our deathbeds, you and I are going to have a full sense of who we are right there.
Agree completely. It doesn't happen until the end.
Stay awake right till the end. So, but we have to do that for our characters. So, in order to make Donkey become the most she can be, I had to give her a really complicated family.
Yep.
And so I gave her a very challenging family. She wants to be very logical. And so she's put in a very illogical family, a family that works by emotion and magic and all kinds of ways. And then, so furthermore, and this came kind of later, I really thought I was going to write about these women on the island. And it was almost as though I was writing about the women pitted against the men. And I kind of wanted the women to win. There was some part of me that was like, these women deserve their island. They should have their island. They shouldn't have to have men on their island. But then what I realized is to make this whole group of women as much themselves as I could, they needed to be an integral part of a larger community. So that larger community suddenly got very interesting to me. So I found that community, you could even enlarge this and say there are national issues going on, but I found that I had I got all the tension that I needed from looking at the role of these women in this small town. So we have all the tension of expectation, and the community around these women is kind of traditional, white, patriarchal, small town America. As a Michigander, this is kind of a little bit of the character of maybe the most of certain rural towns. And so I found that plopping this wild family of women into this town really served it well. So we have the tensions within the family, and those are enough to cause plenty of damage to everybody. But then far more interesting to me when I put it in the community, because what I found there was every political tension that we're working with today as human beings in America. I found all the tensions of, the tensions of environmental issues, the tensions of women's, of what?
Gun control.
Gun control,
Big
absolutely.
issue.
All the issues of free speech and gun control, all the issues of women's reproductive health. I find them all at play in this community. So I realize I really have my hands full now, because every one of those tensions that is playing out nationally is playing out in communities. And it did kind of point out to me, that's where the action is. We tend to think nationally. We tend to think, about national elections and such, but it's really the real meat of the thing is happening right in our small towns. And so I found all those tensions just to be fascinating and dangerous. I mean, you don't know if these women are going to survive.